Ladies and gentlemen, welcome, and we want to just say thank you for tuning in to our very first Lockdown with CF's video interview. We are tremendously blessed to have Dr. Hera on with us today, and for you guys to hear us out as well. So for those of you who don't know who Dr. Hera is, she is a registered chartered health psychologist with the British Psychological Society. For the past 20 years, Dr. Hera has taught undergraduate and postgraduate psychology at several universities in the UK as well as in Malaysia. Currently, she's working with various communities, particularly with those in the education and faith-based institutions, to improve mental health literacy, right? And also her short-term goal is to develop informed communities of educators, faith leaders, peers, and also family members who understand their role in promoting mental health and proactively providing effective mental health care to those who are suffering with mental health problems. In time, she hopes that this effort will help reduce the effects of stigma and misconceptions associated with mental distress and or mental disorders. Right? Her ultimate goal is to improve the quality of life for individuals living with mental health challenges. So thank you once again, Dr. Hera, for being here.
Thank you for having me, Leo. Hi, everybody.
Awesome. So we just want to sort of tap into that, the insight and the experience and just all the things that you know and have gone through, right? So sort of to start us off, what is mental health, right? Some people may think that mental health issues are sort of the same as dyslexia or sort of like autism as well. Is that true?
Right. Hi, everybody. And yeah, although Luke says that I have, insights and all the experience, I'll try my best, okay? There are a lot of questions that we still don't know as health professionals, but I'll do my best to answer the questions that you have today, Luke. I thought what will help is that, I show a few slides. So to your first question, I think I want to sort of show the definition of mental health by the WHO some time ago. And if you look at the definition of mental health, a state of well-being in which every individual realizes his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to her or his community. This is the definition that WHO has come up with. And if you look at the definition, it has nothing to do with mental disorders. So what it's saying is that mental health is a general well-being. So everybody can have good mental health, regardless whether they have been diagnosed with a mental disorders. And people with no mental disorders can also experience poor mental health. So mental health and mental disorders are actually two separate concepts. Yeah. So I know that people have been using the word mental health and mental disorders interchangeably, but they mean different things. So, for example, you mentioned dyslexia and autism. These two are actually conditions. They are diagnosable health conditions. More specifically, they are neurodevelopmental disorders. So meaning that, they are disorders that usually has their onset during childhood. Dyslexia is a specific learning disorder, right? And so therefore these two are actually disorders. They are not, in a sense, a state of mental health. So people with dyslexia, for example, I think that those of us who know a little bit about it are familiar with people like Albert Einstein, people like Tom Cruise, if you're into celebrities, lots of articles, or, there's general knowledge that these two individuals had dyslexia. But if you look at them, they are highly functional And, you know, if you look at the definition again, you know, they are highly productive. They contribute significantly to their community or the society at large. So therefore, you know, it doesn't mean that individuals who are diagnosed with a certain kind of condition, i.e. mental disorders, for example, that they cannot have good mental health.
Yeah.
And conversely, those of us, you know, who have no diagnosis of any form of mental disorders can experience poor mental health. And I would say that during our current climate, a lot of people are having poor mental health.
Yeah.
Right? You know, and we don't find ourselves very productive being, you know, under MCO, for example. So I hope that that clarifies the, you know, that the mental health and mental disorders are two completely different things.
So that's kind of a misconception then, that many people would have. Yeah.
Yes.
Through your experience, I'm sorry, were you going to say something?
Oh no.
Oh, okay. What other misconceptions are rather common, right? When sort of being in this line, in this experience, what are some misconceptions about mental health that you've encountered?
Yeah, there are lots of misconceptions about mental health and mental disorders. You know, as we talked about before, you know, one of those misconceptions is that only those with mental illness have poor mental health, right? I mean, we talked about it a minute ago. The other common misconception has to do with, you know, personal failures. It's as if that, you know, someone with mental illness associated with being weak, you know, being a failure or lack of resilience. You know, if you just be strong enough, you know, you won't suffer from mental illness, for example. And that's a very, very common misconception that has very grave consequences to the individual, you know, who has been diagnosed with a mental illness, because that couldn't be further from the truth. You know, as we talked about, like, for example, Mother Teresa, you know, we all know and love her because she has done so much good work, right? And, you know, she is literally synonymous with, you know, angel of mercy, really, and, you know, having living her whole life trying to help individuals in poverty. She had depression. So, you know, she is not an image of weakness or failure or lack of resilience, isn't it? Right? So this common misconception couldn't be further from the truth. And then the other one that I come across very often is that, you know, people are saying that mental illness is all in one's imagination. You know, is that people imagine themselves as having this illness. So it's as if mental illness is not real as physical illness, like diabetes. Diabetes is real. Depression is unreal, it's imagined. So that's another common misconception that is very difficult to deal with, right? And if anyone believe the misconception, it's understandable why that, you know, they tell people who are suffering from mental illness, just ignore it and it will go away. You know, if you don't have it in your mind, it goes away. I mean, I wish things were that simple, right? I mean, if anybody can just ignore it, the whole world will be a lot better place, you know, without probably mental illnesses and mental health concerns. So it's not as simple as that. And I think that the one other thing that I think as a Christian I come across quite a bit is that the unfortunate misunderstanding that, you know, if you can just pray a bit harder, a bit more diligently, spend a bit more time praying, you know, and also spend, you know, every day making sure, right, that you read the Bible more, and then you can defeat mental illness. I have no objection to praying and reading the Bible, and I think that every Christian ought to have this devotional time, right? Remembering our Lord, remembering who we are in the Lord every single day. We ought to do that. You know, we don't do that just to get something out of it. We ought to do that because that's our identity. But telling someone who experiences or who live with mental illness that if you do more, you know, be more devoted, then you can defeat this, you know, you can get rid of this mental illness is, how should I describe this? It's an unkind advice, right? Because, you know, it's tantamount to saying that if you could be a little bit more spiritual strong, you know, so a lot stronger spiritually, then you won't have mental illness. So it's tantamount to saying that you're not spiritual enough. So I think that that is an unkind statement to make, because it's an assumption that you have mental illness because you're not strong spiritually. So I think those are some of the common misconceptions that I come across as a health professional, unfortunately. And we have to do something about that.
Those are some very powerful misconceptions as well. It can really be, like you said, unkind as well.
Yes, unfortunately. I think that the intention is to be kind, isn't it, Luke? That we all have good intention, but you know what? Good intention is not enough. We need more than good intention. You know, we need good intention based on informed, okay, based on, you know, our informed knowledge of mental health.
So in light of that, what are some things that we can get involved and get informed on these things, like across the way, because there's various sort of struggles of mental health and sort of you know, distress, where it's you know, depression, anxiety, and eating disorders, and also OCD, for example. So across those mental health issues and struggles, what are some common sort of things that they go through, some challenges that they face?
Yeah, I think to begin with, those of us who don't have, or, you know, we don't have these conditions that you mentioned, it is very hard to understand exactly what a person who has been diagnosed with those conditions are actually experiencing. Yeah, I just want to make that straight first, that point across. Yeah, we can be empathetic, we can learn how to empathize, but we can never experience what they experience unless we have the condition. And that is how difficult it is to understand completely what another person with a mental health condition goes through every single day. Having said that, though, I think across the board, right, across the board, anyone who has a diagnosed condition, or you know, who hasn't been diagnosed but is suffering from a form of mental illness, they go through, I think, if I were to summarize it, they go through shame and isolation, right? Let me sort of go through a little bit, go into shame, right? The definition of shame a little bit. Shame is a very, very difficult emotion to deal with, because it's an emotion that involves condemning ourselves, yeah, that we are not good enough, that, you know, we just flawed, yeah, we are somewhat flawed, and so therefore we condemn ourselves when we experience shame. And not only that, that is only one side of shame. The other side is that, you know, because we condemn ourselves as being flawed in some area, therefore other people, right, has a legitimacy to reject us. And that is considered other condemnation, right? That's the two sides of the coin of shame. And you would understand why, if someone experiences shame, you know, it is more likely that they will go into social isolation because they think that, you know, other people will not accept them, that they are not good enough for other people, that they're a burden for other people, right? So I think across the board of everyone who experience mental health condition would experience shame and isolation at one part of their life. And if I were to go a little bit further, right, to talk about the cycle of shame, the cycle of shame involves what we think about ourselves and how we feel about ourselves, and therefore, you know, how we behave as a result of the way we think and the way we feel. So if we think that we are flawed and people will reject me, I feel that shame, and therefore the natural thing to do is to avoid other people, is to withdraw from other people. And sometimes that behavior can be in a form of, like, you know, being angry and blaming themselves, blaming other people. So we can see this cycle of shame, you know, it sort of give us an idea of, you know, what are the general experiences, right? The daily struggle of individuals with the condition. I don't think that they're struggling with the condition per se. They're struggling with the stigmatization that is associated with having that condition. So therefore, you know, many people, right, when they self-condemn, they have lower self-confidence, obviously, and they have even poorer psychological health, right? And whenever they interact with other people, they have this anxiety, you know, that, oh, whether people will reject me or not, you know, can I be myself? Can I share certain things, right? And, oh, what if I be a bit closer to this individual, you know, will this individual leave me one day because, you know, if they find out how I'm really like, right? And what will people think about me, you know, if I can be myself? Yeah. And so they are always in this realm of anxiety and social anxiety, you see, right? Afraid that people will say something about them and wondering what people say about them. And it's quite tiring if you can imagine that. And so for a lot of people, the easier thing is to just avoid social interaction and hide and be in their own cave, right? I'd like to show you a picture that I think that many individuals suffering from mental illness would find themselves in. If you look at the lady, this is where a lot of individuals experiencing mental illness would feel like, you know, the position, the more inferior position. Yeah, and even people who have really good intention trying to help them or trying to relate to them, if we don't level the ground, we'll be sitting on a high horses. And individuals who are experiencing mental ill health will remain at a lower position. So this position of inferiority is another common experiences that, you know, people who suffer from mental illness do experience. So I don't know. I think you know, if I give sort of like that general sense of what many individuals will be experiencing, it's really hard, isn't it, for us to understand exactly what they're going through. But one thing for sure is that we need to really do something about that. Yeah. Right? We need to sort of have that gap, balance that gap a little bit more, so that we can relate at an equal footing.
Well, what about sort of a Christian experience then? A lot of times people sort of think that Christians, we have a genuine faith and trust in God, right? They shouldn't be struggling with that. So in that thought flow, why do Christians struggle with mental health, even though they have a genuine faith and and a genuine trust in God. What would you say to that?
Yeah, I think that was a really, really good question, because I think if you look at the picture right in front of you, I think that this picture of inferiority is even more stark among Christians who suffer from mental illnesses, because I think that there is this misperception that Christians shouldn't be experiencing mental ill health. I think that is really one of the main misconceptions that I have come across among Christian communities. To answer your question, I think it really depends on one's worldview of suffering. Why do we suffer? If there is a God who loves us, why is there suffering? All these questions about theodicy. Yeah. I mean, it's a very big word, right? People centuries are still discussing about theodicy. I think it really, in order to really answer your question, we have to examine what is our worldview about suffering as a Christian. Of course, it's really hard to talk about it in such a short time, but I think I've actually summarized a little bit of my own view, okay? This is my worldview. This is my worldview about suffering as Christian. First of all, I think that, I believe in an almighty creator who is loving, who is almighty, who has created humanity. And he has given humanity free will, right? We're not created as robots. We have a free will, meaning that we have a freedom to choose. And humanity decided to defy God, to live independently of God. And that independence is the definition of sin. And because of that decision, there is a consequence. In fact, there is a consequence of any decision that we make. The consequence of not social distancing, for example, right? So because of that decision, we have a fallen state. Humanity has become fallen. Not just humanity, but nature. So there's a fallen state of nature. And when I understand fallenness as a decaying nature, our body is decaying, our nature, the whole nature is decaying. We have diseases, disorders, and no one is immune to that decay. All of us will die physically, ultimately. So therefore, regardless whether we are Christians or not, we are not immune to these consequences that humanity's free will, has resulted. So we still live in this fallen state at the moment. Yeah. While Jesus has come and rescued us and, has overcome death, we are still living in this fallen state until Christ comes again. But before that, we are still subjected to diseases and disorders. Like, the current moment, COVID-19, case in point. No one is immune to this. It's just because someone confessed that Jesus Christ is his or her savior does not automatically render them immune to COVID-19. Yeah. Similarly, mental health problems. So therefore, even if somebody is a Christian, is a faithful Christian, you are still, we are all subjected to diseases and disorders, including mental illnesses. We know a lot of Christians who are faithful who experience mental illness. right? If you want one example, Martin Luther has depression. And no one who knows Martin Luther would say that he's not a faithful Christian.
Yeah.
I mean, I would like to hear one person say that and maybe give a logical deduction as to why he concludes that he's not a good Christian just because he's got depression.
Yeah.
I think some people don't even know that he's got depression, right? So I think anyone can have mental illness. And having a mental illness does not indicate that someone is a bad Christian. So that's, I think, so far as what my worldview, all right, of suffering, is.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. I think that's a very powerful sort of understanding of suffering, and also understanding that Christians don't have that sort of safe immunity or get out of jail card, right, for struggles, especially in mental health as well. So in light of that, why do you think, so with your worldview, if it's possible, why do, or rather, why does God allow these things to happen to Christians, right? And where is God in all of this, right? Because many of them would sort of feel abandoned by Him, right? As Christians, we feel like He's left us to suffer on our own. So how do you sort of bridge the gap between those two?
Yeah, I think that's again, a very, very good question that would take, a long time to answer with any satisfactory conclusion. But I want to look back to the Bible to answer a little bit of what I can. I want all of us to sort of remember some of these individuals in the Bible, including Jesus. I think that, if you look at every one of these passages, it gives us a clue. It gives us a little bit of at least it sort of let us understand that the men of God, they're not immune to distresses and dismay and grief, i.e. mental ill health. And if you look at Job, for example, right? I mean, many people talk about Job when they refer to suffering. And to your question, why did God allow that? It's a mystery. If you read the whole of Job, Job literally, faced God, right? And demanded that God answer his question of why, why me? And if you look at the book of Job again in context, God never answered his question.
Yeah.
And hence, Job, I can't imagine what Job's position would be like. He wants an answer. I think that God allowed those questions. I don't think that God has ever stopped people from asking him questions. So he allowed Job to ask all the questions, to express all his distress. And, but God uses other forms of response to Job without answering his why question. And if you look at the whole, the book of Job, in the end, even though God did not answer the very question that Job has, why? Why did I have this? Job understood his position in God, his position as the creation rather than the creator. And I think that that's a very, very powerful conclusion in that book. So to me, is that, there are certain things that we don't have an idea about. things are still mysterious, if you like. There are many, many things that are still mysterious. And to date, I don't think that we have an answer to the cause of mental illness. And if someone can tell you that the cause of mental illness is poor spiritual health, I think we need to take a pinch of salt on that. Yeah, the jury is still out there. It's still mysterious in terms of, what causes mental illness. Although we know something about it, but we don't have a clear picture. Not yet, not even close. Right? So I think there are some things that we don't know. The answer is we don't know. But it's okay. It's okay to feel abandoned. I think that when we are in a crisis, we tend to feel abandoned. We tend to, have this feeling of why, and this grief that we experience, which is a natural reaction to any form of distress, all the way to significant trauma. I think that is the bit that God allows. God allows us to be human, to feel, because He gave us all these emotions. They're for a purpose. So it's okay to feel abandoned, but don't let our feeling determine what truth is. Even though we feel abandoned, the truth is we are not abandoned. And truth does not depend on whether we feel good or not, on what we think about the truth, whether we prefer the truth to some other truth or not. It doesn't matter. Truth is truth, whether we like it or not, whether we feel it or not. So this is one thing that I think is awesome about our God. If you look at these passages in front of you, it shows us one common thing. If you read the context again, none of them was abandoned by God. None. Okay? And God is right in the midst of that suffering. So the truth is, God is with us in our suffering. The truth is, Jesus, of all people, understand what suffering is. And He is with us in this suffering. And the third thing is that suffering seems to be a mark of Christianity. And that is something difficult, isn't it, for us to accept? Because we live in a world, in a society that is always trying to get rid of suffering, but that doesn't seem to be the picture of Christianity. The cross is our symbol, Our symbol is not jumping, in celebration. The symbol is the cross. So that I think that's something that we need to think very deeply about. Yeah. So God has not abandoned us, not at all. Not during the COVID season, not during the time of individual suffering from any form of decay, including mental illness. So God is always with us. That's the truth. But when we feel abandoned, God understands that emotion and He ministers to us. But our feeling, our emotion does not reflect the truth. And it cannot reflect the truth. Yeah.
Thank you. I think it's very different, right? Compared to our normal sort of understanding of suffering and where is God in all of this. I think it's very powerful how you mentioned that the symbol of the cross as well is something that is symbolic for Christianity. I think that's very powerful. So thank you. So in those cases then, are any of these cases where people sort of struggle with mental health, are they caused by sort of like their faith, or is it just purely sort of psychological when it comes to mental health issues. So, for example, with more specifically like eating disorders, people who struggle with anorexia or bulimia, uh, how is it then? Is it faith or is it psychological or physiological?
Yeah. This is where I think that, I would like you to look at this picture. Yeah. As I said in the beginning, there are a lot of things that we don't know about the causes of mental illnesses. And, if you were talking about eating disorders, like many other mental illnesses, they have multiple causes, multifactorial. And there is no one single factor that causes eating disorders. So eating disorders is multifactorial. So therefore, this is a very, very important point to note. We like simplicity, right? Because our brain is devised that way. Yeah, we simplify things because so that we economize, right?
Yeah.
Not our brain cells, like too much. Yeah. We like to economize, we like to simplify, and that's okay. That's okay. All right. It's not, it's not to say that we need to complicate matters, but we cannot be simplistic. There is a difference between simplifying and being simplistic. And so therefore, I think for many people, it is to a certain extent comforting, maybe, if they have a simple answer to a very complex issue, so that we can have a sense of meaning, right? A sense of meaning is so important to everybody. But the truth is, again, the truth and feeling are two different things. The truth is there are multiple causes of mental illnesses. And so therefore, we have to understand that there are a dynamic interaction of factors that contribute to any one mental illness. So we have the biological factors, we have the psychological factors, we have the social, and we have the spiritual, and all of them play a role in determining, in developing, and maintaining a form of mental illness. And this is true for all mental illnesses to date. And so therefore, it really depends on which mental illness you're talking about. But I think suffice to say that we must therefore avoid all the overlap. Yeah, avoid over spiritualizing. Mental illness is not a spiritual condition. Avoid over medicalizing, like some people do. And unfortunately, some psychiatrists do. They over medicate, right? Everything is medicalized, right? And that's not true. Or some of us over normalize. I think that, it is quite common in the social media to over normalize mental health problems. And I'll give you an example. For example, self-harm. Recently self-harm has been normalized, and I think over-normalized to be one of the forms of coping mechanism that is socially acceptable. I don't think that should be the way too, because again, when you over-normalize, it's being simplistic. Yeah, it's being simplistic when we want to understand we want to understand mental illness. So don't engage in any over-normalizing. And I think, the one thing, the one that I come across a lot of is the everything is from your childhood experience. Oh, I know why you have this, because when you were younger, this happened, right? Or, when you were a child, this happened. Or, your parents didn't do this to you when you were a child, or something like that. Yeah, so I think, just to sort of say that, mental illness is something that is very complex. And no two individuals with the same diagnosed mental health condition would have the same causes. So I think that, the jury is still out there. So let's take, pause, yeah? Let's take some pause before we conclude that we actually know what's going on. Let's have a room, okay? Just some room for uncertainty there.
Well, thank you on that. So we'll take a quick break after this last question, if that's okay with you, and then we'll resume
Sure.
after the break.
Okay.
Okay.
See you after the break.
Yeah. So this last question, before we go for the break, is there a particular age group or gender that you find is more affected with mental health struggles or by mental health struggles? What's your take on that?
Well, I think that it depends on what condition, what mental health condition you're referring to.
Right.
Like just now when we talk about autism and when we talk about, dyslexia, those are neurodevelopmental conditions that normally develop during childhood. So they would, be more commonly found in children, for example, to start with. Or, if you're talking about dementia, neurocognitive conditions, then they tend to affect the older people. But by and large, if you look at this statistic I'm showing you now, right, when we talk about mental health and adolescents, like 1 in 5, like 20% of children and adolescents have mental disorders, right? Or that half of all mental disorders occur before age 14, and then 3/4 before age 24. Or that, the statistics that shows that suicide is the second leading cause of death in 15 to 29 years old. These statistics are showing us that, a particular age group, i.e. adolescents in young adulthood, this range of age is something that we should be really focusing on.
Yeah.
Because, most mental disorders have their onset during this time. So this time is a period where, there are many things going on with someone's development, and therefore it's a crucial period of time that we should watch for.
So in terms of gender, then is there anything that is sort of indicative that a specific gender is sort of more prone to it? Is that a case? Or?
Well, there are, for some conditions, there are gender differences, but we have to take, again, some pause before we conclude that there is a gender difference in a certain condition, because of one issue, and that is the social desirability. Usually, when we are in a society where males are expected to be, quote unquote, stronger and not so emo, for example. Yeah. A lot of things that, would deter males from, from showing or from admitting or acknowledging, right? And because of that, one hindrance that could already contribute to the underreporting of many conditions among males. Having said that, there are genetic differences or contributions to certain disorders, right? And so there are certain mental illness that has disproportionate gender, one gender as compared to the other. For example, eating disorders that you mentioned, there are a lot more females compared to males among individuals diagnosed with all forms of eating disorders, especially, when we talk about anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa, right? These two, you'll find a lot more females compared to males. Having said that, the frequency of males being diagnosed with eating disorders are on the rise. Yeah. So again, the picture is not so black and white.
Yeah.
It depends on what condition you're talking about, and it depends on, you know, how people do the research to look at, you know, gender differences.
Thank you. Yeah, so to remember that, you know, we have to pause and sort of examine the factors that we have to take into account. That's really helpful. Right. Thank you so much. So we'll take a quick break, and then we'll come back right after the break. Thank you for watching Lockdown with Sia. Ladies and gentlemen, we're back for after the break from our interview with Dr. Hera on mental health. So we're gonna dive right back in to the next question. Dr. Hera, once again, thank you. We want to ask you, in your opinion, what are the reasons that many would find those who struggle with mental health, right, to be sort of weird or maybe even freaky, right, or freaks, and some people may pause them, think of them as dangerous, right? Is there a valid reason? Is there anything that we can look at?
Yeah, I don't think that it's just for mental health conditions that people would, you know, call another weird. I'm just gonna show you a few pictures just to make the point. You know, we, you know, human nature is really interesting, except when it comes to the truth of ourselves, right? Yeah, it's not that funny anymore. I think the truth is that many of us are only comfortable with what we know. You know, what we don't know, what we find different, what is beyond, you know, our perspective, we find that quite disconcerting. We find that quite uncomfortable. And then we try and find reason for our discomfort so that we can, you know, balance ourselves and have a better equilibrium. And one, again, a simple way, a heuristic way, a fast, you know, how our brain actually just tick, so quickly. We make an assumption, you know, it's intuitive for us to come up with a very simple explanation for that difference, that discomfort that we feel. And the word weird, you know, comes to mind. And so if that person is weird, then it justifies why I would feel discomfort or I'll feel uncomfortable about it. Is that person who is weird, you know, not that I am ignorant, is that they are weird. You know, it's a lot simpler and more acceptable. And all these processes are not really, you know, sometimes conscious to us. It happen at a very unconscious level because, you know, that's the automatic way that we think, and our brain works, you know, automatically majority of the time, and we are not even aware that we consider someone weird, but we are definitely aware that we detach ourselves from them. So yeah, so there is a perfectly, you know, explainable kind of reason as to why we would disconnect, you know, or we would detach ourselves from someone who's different.
So in light of that, what are some ways that we can better understand those who are struggling with mental health, and maybe some ways that we can help them, right? So for those people who maybe have OCD or eating disorders, and maybe even like people with personality disorders, how do we sort of understand and also sort of lean into the conversation and help them?
Yeah, I think, you know, I just want to reiterate again what I said before, that we can, that there is a limit to our understanding. you know, we can, if we don't have the condition, it is very difficult for us to literally understand what that person is going through. Having said that, it doesn't mean that we cannot understand them better, right? But there is a limit. And so I would like to suggest two things maybe that we can try, okay, how to understand better. And the first thing is the easier thing to do, and that is to read around, right? There are plenty of information, good information about a variety of mental health issues, mental disorders, yes, that we can read. And we live in an information age, and you know, we just use our fingers to search, and there are plenty of good information out there. So we need to sort of spend time reading and engaging our rational mind, because it's easier to make a conclusion with our intuition rather than using our rational mind, because it takes longer and it takes a lot more work. But I think that we need to do that, you know, so to debunk misperceptions, we need to challenge our misperception with accurate information. And what I mean by accurate information is not fake news, you know, not everything that you read. Not just because something is written doesn't mean that it's real. It doesn't mean that is good information. So evidence-based information. And later I will show you some of the better websites to go into so that you can have accurate information, evidence-based scientific information. So that's the first thing, that is the easier thing to do. The second thing of having a better understanding is a little bit harder. It goes against our human nature a little bit more. I mean, reading is also going against our human nature because we like intuition, you know, more than rationality. But the second thing takes a lot more effort, and that is to take perspective. Right? Taking perspective requires us to put aside, not to erase, right? To put aside our perspective. You know, put aside the lens that we're having, that we're seeing the world through. We put that aside and we put on the lens that the other person is looking through. It's like, you know, putting off your lenses and then putting on the sunglasses that the person that you're talking to is actually wearing, and looking into the world and how it looks like from that lens. And so that perspective taking is a lot that, you know, involves a lot more effort, because, you know, we have to tell ourselves to intentionally to say, okay, stop it, Hera. Listen to what they have to say. Don't use your understanding to understand their world. It's like, you know, be a tourist into their world, right? When you're a tourist, well, now it's terrible. We can't even travel anywhere. But if we, you know, if MCO is removed and we are traveling again, you know, if you were to go to Italy, for example, you're a tourist, and you don't tell the Italians, you know what, you need to cook pasta in this way. You know, it's too hard, your pasta. Yeah. You know, al dente, that doesn't work with me as a Chinese. Yeah. You know, you don't do that, right? I mean, you go to Italian restaurant and you eat their food the way they cook it, the way they understand their culinary practices. Yeah. And you try to ask them, oh, you know, so this is the way that you cook your pasta. You know, help me understand a little bit, because as Chinese, you know, we do things, we cook our noodles differently. Although pasta is from China to begin with. Yeah. Okay. I think taking perspective requires us to put aside ours, not to lose it, but to put aside our perspective, to just listen and let the other person tell you about their world. And often we listen to correct, right? That's not empathetic listening. Empathetic listening is that we listen to understand. We listen to gather more perspective. And that way of listening is what I would call a dialogic listening, is to listen to have a dialogue, to listen to find out more about them, not to listen so that you can tell them more about you. Yeah. So that takes, that takes intentionality to do. So if you can do these two to start with, I think that, will do wonders, yeah, to create a community for individuals who really need a safe space to share what their experiences are like.
I think it's also, it makes sense as well, because different people struggle, like you said in the beginning, that different people with the same sort of diagnosis, right? They struggle differently, right? And so that's why you have to sort of ask them and take it from their perspective. I think it's very helpful.
Absolutely. And I think that, if you ask somebody, let's say you ask two people who have depression, a clinical depression, they will describe to you very different experiences. And to help another with depression, I hope that, individuals with depression, they would want to hear what the other person's experience is like. So sometimes, we have this tendency, isn't it? Is that, oh yeah, I know how depression actually feels like, Sometimes I also can't get out from bed, right? But what I do is that, I just put 2 alarm clocks and I'm able to get out of bed. Well, that is true for you. That's not true for individuals with depression. So sometimes, we try to sort of use our perspective, right? Try to advise another person what they can do. It's like problem solving. It's like fixing them, right? While the intention is good, as I said, you need more than intention when you want to walk alongside individuals who struggle with mental health problems. You need more than intention. You need not knowledge. You need know-how. And so therefore, that's the worst thing to say to somebody with depression, that, just put 2 alarm clocks. What's wrong with you? If you can't get up, just solve the problem. For goodness sake, solve the problem, right? You can't have 2 alarm clocks. Get your mother to wake you up. It's like, that's not the point.
Yeah.
If you say that, you have not read what depression is like, and you have not taken perspective. And so therefore, it's actually better if you were just not to say anything, right? Because the things that we say sometimes, although it sound very logical to us, it sound as a good solution to us, but we are really talking about apple and pear. So therefore, again, to take pause and to read, to take perspective.
Yeah.
So as we go through this conversation today, I think it's becoming a little bit clearer that, mental health is more complex than we would like it to be. And walking alongside someone with mental health problem is more than just good intention. Yeah, more than just having a concern. So I think that, we need to take this, if you are serious, in trying to walk alongside someone, especially as a Christian, to make God known to those who really need him. We really need to start developing know-how in walking alongside someone. And I just thought that I would share 2 very specific way, reading, you can read a lot of things, and then taking perspective, it's also like, a little bit more abstract. But these are the two things, the specific things that I like to share. I think I come across a lot of individuals who struggle with mental health, and the two common things that they say to me is that they really don't expect people to solve their problems. They don't, it's not their expectation. They don't expect their friends to fix them. In fact, they don't want their friends to fix them. They know some things are not easy to fix, and that their friends are not doing that role. But what they really want is a safe space, like somebody that they could just be themselves with, somebody who could just give them the permission, to talk about things that are really troubling them in their minds, things that are so dark and so socially unconventional, so socially unacceptable, so difficult to share, and even among Christians in particular, for example, being abandoned, being abandoned by God, knowing that God has not abandoned. It's just sharing that, the feeling of being abandoned, and the sense that whether or not God loves them, and all these theologically unsound things to share. Individuals just need a space where they can voice these things, and having another person being in their cave with them to allow them to share these things. I think that's a practical thing that we can start to do, is to be able to provide this space for difficult conversation. That's the first thing, right? The second practical thing is to stop treating that person like a condition. Sometimes when we get to know a person and then we found out that they have mental health problems, let's say they have anxiety problems, yeah? And every time we talk to them, it's about anxiety. It's about reducing anxiety. It's about asking about how anxious or not anxious they are. And sooner or later, every conversation that we have has something to do with anxiety. And it loses, the person loses their identity in this conversation. And it seems as if that I am anxiety, So talk about other things. Talk about life with them. Talk about your work. Talk about what is interesting. Talk about the ridiculous things people are doing during MCO, and talk about life. Live life with them. Don't just talk about their condition. That's only a part of them. It's not all of them. So treating the person as a person rather than a condition is something that we can practically do. So I hope that the general thing, like reading about it and taking perspective, and more specific thing is to provide that safe space in a non-judgmental environment, listening to them share, and also treating them like a person, that you have conversations with other friends, who's not having any condition, just like, just have life together.
Yeah.
I think those are the things that you can do.
I think that's very powerful as well, because I think that's something that will really help people as well. Yeah. So thank you. Okay. So the next question that we want to sort of find out, right? If there are any cases, right, where these mental health struggles are caused by physiology, right? And sort of what are the implications of that? Is therapy still needed, or is it just medication? Or is it both? Or so how do we look at that?
Right. Well, when we talk about medication, it's true that not every mental disorder requires medication. Okay, in fact, there are many mental disorders who, you know, they don't need medication. But when in cases that medication is required, we must take medication. And I think that, you know, in a lot of studies to date, it is still true that most condition requires both medication and therapy for, you know, the best result. But I think that, you know, in many situations, individuals are either taking medication per se or therapy per se, right? But when we look at evidence-based, you actually need both for optimal results. So I think that, you know, medication is definitely something that we must consider to take if necessary. So when you look at disorders like schizophrenia, bipolar, you know, medication is a part of the therapy, part and parcel of what one has to do to be treated. And I think that good practice is that, you know, you take medication as necessary, as provided by medical health professionals like psychiatrists, you know, so that you can live life well. I mean, if we have no problem with individuals with diabetes taking medication, or individuals with cardiovascular conditions, hypertension, taking medication, why would we have problem with individuals having mental disorders taking medication?
Yeah.
So that's a question that I think everyone has to ask. And I think if I were to guess again, and as lots of literature, you know, we're looking into this question, the stigmatization associated with mental illness, you know, will again explain why that we have a very different treatment, right? That we have a different attitude towards taking medication among those who have physical condition as opposed to those who has mental health problems. So stigma is a big thing, and it's stopping us from doing what is right, what is needful.
So a sort of follow up on that then. Is there a need or like a role of medication for Christians who struggle with it as well? Is it necessary for Christians as well to sort of take it?
Yeah, I think, you know, this question comes up quite a bit among the Christian communities. And I think it's true as, you know, for mental disorders as it is for medical conditions. I know some Christians who refuse to take medical medicine for things like hypertension, diabetes, as I talked about, or even cancer, right? And, you know, they rather do something else. And I think that, you know, it has to do again with the worldview of what is it about taking medication. And, you know, as Christians, as you asked a very good question, why is the, you know, what's the role of Christian in taking medication? In my view, I think taking medication and being a Christian are two different things. They are, you know, exclusive to each other. They nothing to do with each other. In fact, they're not even related, right?
Yeah.
Being a Christian and taking medication are two different issues. And somehow along the way, these two are mingled together. But I'd just like to say, though, that, you know, I'm someone, I think my view is that I believe all truth is God's truth. And the law of nature and the principles of theology, they are not mutually exclusive, but they are different things. One talk about nature, and the other talk about existential questions of what life is about, who God is, and how important is God in life, right? And, you know, while I understand that as Christians, we want to be good children of God, we must understand what the role of medication is. And in my mind, taking medication is a personal responsibility. It's a personal duty. So taking medication when it is necessary should be a responsible duty of a Christian, because we are asked to do what is right. Now, if we don't take medication when it is necessary and insist that, you know, we just want to pray about it so that God can heal us supernaturally, it's like saying to God, God, I prefer that you heal me supernaturally than taking the medication that you have given the doctors wisdom to come up with. So I think that, to me, if you need medication, and as a Christian you don't take medication because you think that taking medication will make you lesser of a Christian, then I think we need to reconsider that view. You know, because I think that, you know, God has given us wisdom, and God has asked us not to be ignorant.
Yeah.
You know, again, case in point about COVID, the current COVID-19 situation. I don't know whether you have, you know, come across news regarding churches not taking heed of social distancing. I find that, you know, I find that quite disturbing, to be honest, because I think social distancing, like taking medication, is a personal responsibility. And we take medication or we social distance because we know that if we don't, it is more likely that we have a negative consequence. And we know this because we understand the science behind the study of nature. So we know this because we understand that there is a scientific reason behind social distancing. There is a scientific reason behind medication. But we still see people defying that because they insist in meeting physically to worship God. And then they use the reason they use the scripture to support their reason for meeting. So some churches say that, you know, oh, we don't want to social distance. We want to continue meeting physically because God has asked us to not stop meeting together. We are still meeting, aren't we, Luke? So therefore, it's kind of hard. I think I cringe as a Christian because, the whole world seems to think that Christians behave like that. You know, so ignorant about and so insistent. And it's as if that, you know, we are a very special group of people who are not subjected, who are totally immune to the COVID-19 virus, and as if that we are not part of the physical world here, and that we are a very special being being protected from COVID-19. I really cringe at that, because I don't think that this group of people who have decided to meet as a church represents God well, they use God's name in vain. And to be honest, I'm quite upset about that. I don't think that God asks us to ignore things that are true. And I think that we need to consider, all truth as God's truth, scientific truth about the nature, the state of nature, including if we need medication for our condition. We need to take that as part of truth, right? We also need to take the truth about humanity, the truth about God, that we are totally dependent on God, and God cannot be apart from our existence. Then we are holding, all truth as God's truth, and we need to be wise about it. So to me, taking medication is a personal responsibility. And if you need medication and you don't take medication, it's like telling God, God, give me healing in a very specific way. I want supernatural healing. I don't want medication. So, and to me, that's not trusting the Lord. That's not, allowing God to heal us. So I'm not sure whether I'm making that point clear, but that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, no, but that's very true as well. Yeah, thank you. So in light of that, what are some helpful resources, right, that you have used or you would recommend for people to use in helping people with mental health struggles, whether it's anxiety or depression or eating disorders or bipolar, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Before I show you the resources, I'd like to sort of show you a quote from Martin Luther that has been going around, I think, because of the many ways that Christians are compelled to behave in this time of crisis with COVID. And I think that is relevant to what we were discussing a minute ago about medication. Can I just show you the quote? Yeah, and this is during a time of Martin Luther during the I think in 1527 when he wrote this among during the time where bubonic plague is rampant, Black Death they call it. And he said this, I think it's a very, very famous quote that is going around recently. He said this: "I shall ask God mercifully to protect us, then I should fumigate." Oops, sorry, I can't read the whole. I shall fumigate, help purify the air, administer medicine, and take it. I shall avoid places and persons where my presence is not needed, in order not to become contaminated, and thus perchance inflict and pollute others, and so cause their death as a result of my negligence. Okay, and then the rest you can read it. Yeah. So I think this quote is a very good advice when it comes to the role of medicine in Christian living. I think what Martin Luther here is saying is that there is a role that medicine has, and that taking medicine is our duty. And it's also true that we need to pray and ask God for mercy, but they are two different things. They don't need to be, canceling each other. So if I pray, I don't take medication. And if I take medication, I don't need to pray. So I think that's the point that, I was trying to make just now. Sorry, I was waffling a bit.
It's okay.
Okay. Back to the resources, yeah? There are plenty of resources out there, but I think I would just recommend 3 good ones. And then from these resources, they will send you to others that are pretty useful. All these resources are charity-based, so they are non-profit. And all these resources that I'm going to share with you have very accurate. I think that, I've gone through all of them, and they have accurate information. They have good interactive information as well. So, they're good to have, okay? Just want to sort of point to the last one, the Mind and Soul Foundation. It's actually a UK-based charity, and they exist to help Christians understand mental health a bit more. And they're also trying to, I think, this is a really good website to go into. Doesn't matter whether you are someone experiencing mental health problem or that you are someone who want to learn more about mental health. It's good for anyone interested to go into this website. And they do talk about the Christian involvement in mental health care for themselves and for others. So I would really suggest that you go into this website and understand more about how we can integrate. When I talk about all truth is God's truth, how we can integrate faith and science. It is an integration. They don't have to be exclusive to each other. How we can integrate science and our faith in living as a Christian, representing God well, either as someone experiencing the conditions or someone who is trying to make life better for another. So do look into them. They're really good resources.
So for those of you who are watching it right now, you can go ahead and pause this video so that you can jot down these 3 websites. I think they're very powerful and definitely will be very helpful as well. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah. And so with that then, with all these resources and stuff like that, are there any methods of therapy or counseling that friends and family, like people who are not professional or qualified, are there any methods that we can try to do for our loved ones who are struggling, would you say?
Yeah. Oh, there are a lot of things that you can do. The role of community it's significant. And I think that you can do a lot more in helping individuals who are struggling with mental health compared to health professionals, to be honest, because you see them on a more regular basis compared to those of us who are working in the field. So there are plenty of things you can do, but of course, in such a short period, it's very difficult to list down everything that you can do. You can look at some of these websites that I have suggested, and they do have information for carers. They do have information for family members, for a variety, right, and specifically to specific conditions. So you can have a look at that, and then, they will guide you in knowing how to be better supporters, in different circumstances. But I think we have talked about that just now, right? Taking perspective, giving people safe space, and really treating them like a person are things that you can do more than reading about conditions. So you can reach out today to someone whom you have connected with. You can reach out to them, ask how they are doing during this MCO, and asking what have you been doing, and just connect. Talk about things, make them feel that that they are cared for, that someone is thinking about them, that they matter. These are little things that we take for granted, little things that we think is not as important, it's so small, but little things are significant things. So maybe we can start doing that today.
So, so from the various experiences, then, would you recommend then that families sort of take part in, so for example, cognitive behavioral therapy and stuff like that, where people can sort of do it on their own. Would you recommend then that families or friends take sort of an involvement in that for people?
Um, okay. I think that, we must differentiate between therapy and support. And I think that, to conduct therapy, we need training. And, while it looked quite simple online, they are not that simple to do. And I don't think that therapy is for everyone to do, but support is for everyone to engage in. It's not, I don't think support is easier than therapy. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying there are different roles that we play. Health professionals who are trained, their role is to give and provide good therapy, right? And all medicine, if they're psychiatrists. That's the role of medical health professionals. But the role of community, like you, to your peers, the role is to support. So the supportive role is tough because you need to do this on a very regular basis. Yeah, and you need to walk alongside the individual. So this is something that I think is the role of the community, such as yourself. So I think your role is not to do therapy. So therefore, I don't recommend that you do cognitive behavioral therapy or you do, other forms of therapy. Okay. But I do recommend that you connect, you learn how to take perspective, you learn how to give individuals safe space. It's not easy because when you learn how to do, how to listen empathically, it is not something that you're born with. Listening empathically is something that you need to learn, that we all need to learn. And there's a lot of, again, steps to learn in empathic listening. So I hope that, at least one thing is clear, is that we all have different roles. Yeah. So as you look at all these websites, they are also, they do have certain readings that you can actually go into to read about therapies. But bear in mind that those are actually for mental health professionals to engage in. There are also information for family members and carers, whereby those things that they mention in those articles are for you to do something about, that you can do something about. And it's a very important and significant thing that you can do.
So thank you for that clarification as well, because I've noticed some people, they sort of take matters into their own hands. So you have family members who do ERP or CBT or all these kinds of therapy methods that professionals should do. But instead they sort of take it into their homes and they try it out. And sometimes it can be quite counterproductive as well. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I think that, we have enough to do in our own role, right? I don't think that health professionals can take over the family support role, for example, or the peer support role. I don't think that, personally, I really don't think I can do that, right? For example, I don't think I can support your friend better than you. You are the best person to support your friend, right? And in fact, your friend will go to you rather than come to me to share certain things, right? And to live life with. So you are in a much better position that I cannot be in. And we each have our own, roles to play, and that's a full-time job.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if we can do our own role well, I think that that's what needs to happen, because a lot of time and effort is already placed in conducting that role. So let's just focus on what our role is. Yeah. So our role as supporters is not to cure nor fix. Yeah. Certainly when you talk about mental health conditions, very few cases are fixed. Yes. But when we talk about walking alongside another, it's a lifelong journey. And it's not something easy. I think it's easier for professionals because, you know, once we see them for the week, you know, we wait till the next time we see them. But for you who are in their life, in their community, you know, you need to engage and continue engaging them on a regular basis, right? Because you are part of their life and they're part of yours. And so that's a really tough thing to do.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah. We have some questions from the audience, right? People from CF who we've taken your questions. We want to ask you as well, Dr. Hera. Um, the first question then would be, to what extent should we intervene with someone who is perhaps suicidal due to mental health struggles, right? They want to take their own life. So where do we draw the line between actively helping someone and sort of passively praying and trusting in God and helping from afar? Yeah, that's a question. Yeah.
Okay. Wow, that's a big question. But I'll try my best to answer it in a nutshell. Okay, I think we need to do both, right? I think praying for another person is definitely something that we can do. Yeah, and I'm sure that if you tell the other person, hey, you know, I'm praying for you, I'm thinking about you, yeah, and that can be very comforting. And certainly we need to do that. And certainly when it comes to issues like suicidality, we really need, right, to bring it before God, to give us wisdom to know how do we engage with, you know, individuals who are struggling with it. But prayer alone, like intention, is not sufficient. We need to do more than praying. Yeah. I'm not saying that prayer is not powerful. Yeah, that's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But I'm saying that we need to do, in addition to praying, we need to be more proactive when it comes to suicidality. I know a lot of people, you know, have this fear that if they talk about suicide with someone who's suicidal, it'll push them off the cliff, right? Because you're afraid that you'll say something wrong and then, you know, they'll decide to just end their lives. And there is a real fear that has stopped many people from talking about suicide. And we know that all the evidence that has been coming through related to suicidality, you know, has encouraged people to talk about suicide, right? But it's not random talk. It's not like, you know, knee-jerk reaction to suicidality conversations. But it's, again, you know, an informed, systematic conversation about it. Look, we can do this in another session where I can take you step by step through developing a conversation about suicide, right? And what we need to ask and how we need to sort of conduct the conversation, why we need to ask certain questions, for example, and how to develop a safety plan that is necessary. Look, we don't take suicidality indication and you know, and treat it as, oh, brush it off, right? We need to take every suicidality conversations very seriously. Because we do not know, you know, how serious is that person when they allude, right, to taking his or her life, or allude to ending, or allude to the fact that they're tired of life. We don't know what would happen after that, right? And we don't know how severe a struggle that they're having. So we must have conversations with them. That is the view of, you know, all mental health professionals, is that, you know, we need to talk more, not less, right, about suicide ideation. But again, as we talked about just now, it's not easy for someone to talk about suicidal thoughts, especially for Christians to talk about suicidal thoughts, you know, because of that stigma again, of being associated with suicide is a sin. What on earth are you talking about? You know, don't you think that as a Christian you should never think about suicide, right? So we know that a lot of people are hindered in even sharing about their struggles when they do have suicidal thoughts. But, you know, it's something, again, a safe space that Christian communities need to create, especially for Christians who are really struggling with suicidality, to talk about it, to, you know, come together and to really process it together. So it's something that I would really like to continue, if you would like to, a session on suicidality per se. But for now, for those of you who really want to know more about it, you go to Beyond Blue. I think they do have a very, very good section on suicidality. You know, they tell you what to do, what you can do as community. They tell you how to look out for signs of suicidality and all the rest. So you can go in there and then, you know, go look into that section, and then you can be better informed as to what you can do as a friend if someone in your circle, in your community is suicidal.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So I think the resources there as well, and I think we definitely will take up your offer, Hunter. That's really gracious and kind. Thank you. To hear about the step-by-step ways that we can sort of have those conversations. So another question from the CF also is, what can I do with my friend who is struggling with mental health? They're sort of denying the reality of that struggle, where they sort of, oh, I don't need help, I'm okay, I'll be all right. So what can they do as a friend who cares for them?
Yeah, I think this has, again, you know, is linked to stigmatization. The reason why that sometimes people do not want to acknowledge that they have something that they're struggling with, which they obviously are struggling, for example. To other people it's very obvious, but to them, you know, they'll find it hard to acknowledge that. It's because of that element of stigma, the element of shame, you know, that if they were to admit that something is not quite right, the repercussion of that is that they're not a good person, they're not good enough, that they are, you know, they're not strong enough, etc. And it's understandable why that they don't want to acknowledge that, or that they fear acknowledging that, because maybe they fear what you would think about them if they were to acknowledge that. So it is about leveling the ground again, you know, because the more that we insist that, hey, you know, something is wrong with you, for goodness sake, why can't you see it? You know, if we insist that that's the case, then, you know, that we become further and further apart, and they become further and further lower. They become lower in their status with us, you see, because we are, you know, saying to them, you are the one having the problem, right? And that's not the posture we want to take. Remember that, you know, that there's a huge element of shame that they are struggling with. We don't want to make them more shameful. So there are a few things you can do at this point. You know, take perspective, understand where they're coming from, put yourself in your shoe, right? And it's not about winning the argument that I am right, you are something wrong. That's not the point.
Yeah.
It's not winning about winning an argument. It's about keeping that connection. It's about letting this person know, hey, you know what? Regardless what you think, okay, I'm gonna stick by you. Regardless what you think, right? I'm still going to engage you. I am your community. I am your friend. Let's work this thing out together. Maybe not today, maybe another day.
Yeah.
But while we wait, I am still the same, right? Our relationship does not have any difference.
Yeah.
We are still in this together. And during the time of waiting, perhaps, you can share your vulnerability. Look, everyone has problems, right? And it's just that, a lot of people think that only other people don't have problems. For example, we live in an Instagram world, right? Anything that is Instagrammable is good to share.
Yeah.
Acknowledging that someone has a problem is not Instagrammable.
Yeah.
So we live in a very, very, a very pressurizing society right now. Okay, and I think it will help this individual if we can be genuine with them, starting with us. Yeah. What are some of the things that we are struggling with? You don't have to lie about it. It's like, oh yeah, I also have depression. Actually, you don't have. You don't have to lie about it. OCD that I had to watch a lot these days. Right?
Yeah.
20 seconds more. Please don't patronize the person that you're talking to. But be genuine about it. That, some of the things that you're really struggling. I mean, pull something out of that closet that you are trying to shun from everyone else. Ask yourself, hey, if I want my friend to be genuine and to acknowledge his problems, I have to acknowledge mine first, don't you think? And if you can acknowledge that and you can share a little bit more of that, I think that, we can sort of level the ground a little bit. As I said, we're all fallen. There are plenty of fallen aspect of us. But because of that expectation of Christian testimony, a lot of us in churches, right, we hide our closet. We hide our skeleton in that closet. I think we need to come out to talk about the various struggles that we have. And mental health problem is only one aspect. Yeah. So if you can do that, I think I'd rather that you focus on these things than focusing on, convincing this person that something is wrong with him. Because it's not that he doesn't know. Don't point out the obvious, right? I think people who know who are not feeling that great know that they are not feeling that great. You don't have to emphasize that.
Yeah.
So that's a small step, but very important and very difficult step for anyone to take. So if you're serious in wanting to walk alongside someone who's struggling with mental health, you got to be ready to be vulnerable. Are you ready to be vulnerable? This is a question that you need to ask yourself. Okay.
So we've reached the end of our interview, right? But I was hoping that if it's okay, that you could give probably some words of encouragement, hope, right? And if you have any, to sort of comfort those who are suffering, right? People who are struggling with mental health issues, and also people who are caring for people who are struggling with mental health issues, and sort of as Christians, what are some encouragement you can provide?
Yeah, maybe I'll show you one of my favorite verses. I have made this verse as my life verse for now. Yeah, and I love this verse because, you know, it shows me everything about who I am and who God is. And Jesus himself said this to his disciples. And if you look at why we believe in the Christian God, this is why for me, because the Bible does not sugarcoat life. The Bible is very clear and very transparent about human depravity and what we need, and the hope, the eternal hope that we can have and we do have in Christ. So therefore, I want to share this verse to end today's session. Jesus said, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. I think for those of us who are suffering and who find ourselves wrestling with mental health problems, you know, I hope that this verse would remind us, yeah, even though we feel bad about ourselves, feelings are feelings. The truth is that we live in a fallen world. We have a fallen body and mind. That Christ has already told us that in this world you will have trouble. We may be experiencing mental health problems, but other people are experiencing trouble in their own ways, right? But that's not all that Jesus was saying. He said, but take heart, I have overcome the world. He did not say, you need to overcome the world. He said, I have overcome the world. So our role is not to get fixed. Jesus has done that. Yeah. So our role is to live life well despite having and living with the condition. And you will live a life fulfilled in Christ because he has promised that. And for those of us who have decided or toying with the idea of walking alongside someone, or who have known someone who's struggling and are living with this individual and wondering how you can be of support, please know that your role is significant. Your role is crucial because your role is to provide individuals who struggle with a community, with a reminder that they are part of this whole family and that you love them and that they matter to you and you actually need them. Not that they need you, you need them to be part of your community. Remind them of their role, remind them of this hope. So there's a lot of things that we can do as community. So I leave that there for both the sufferers as well as those in community. So may the Lord speak to every one of us wherever our position is, and may he find us faithfully present where he has placed us.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Is it okay then if we sort of request for you to pray for us? Just pray for those who are struggling, those who are helping, and those of us who are just sort of in between, if that's okay with you.
Yes, definitely. Okay. Let's pray. Lord Jesus, you are the wounded healer. You understand every darkness that we experience. Lord, many of us may not understand why we find ourselves in this state and how long more that we will be in such a state. Lord, may you come and minister to every heart and every soul. May you minister deeply to us and provide us with the comfort that we seek, even when we don't quite understand, Lord. Give us that peace that passes all understanding, to infuse us your word of life, to sustain us on a daily basis. And Lord, may we live our life faithfully, and may we find life abundant in you as you promise, despite our fallen nature. Lord, may you spur us on. And Lord, may you also help us understand the hope that we are to have in you, that we are to hold on to you. And also the truth that even when we are too tired to hang on to you, you are still holding on to us. And that is all that matters. So Lord, I pray your Holy Spirit will speak to each and every one of us in our own circumstance. Lord, lead us, use us, enable us, heal us, and transform us, Lord, into the person that you have purposed us to be. So that, oh God, we will represent you well as a body of Christ. Father, I want to pray for these young people, Lord, who have come together to seek you. Lord, honor them with their desires, with their love for you. Honor them, Lord, be with them, walk with them, Lord. And I pray, Father, that they will grow with one another in you, that they will continue to encourage one another, provide safe space for one another, that they will understand who you are through your word. Give them wisdom, discernment, sensitivity, Lord, as they read your word and as they engage one another. So I pray for the Nottingham CF, Lord, that you grow them and that you will knit them close, Lord, to one another. Make them into a church that represents you well. Make them into a church that bring healing to those who are desperately seeking you. Lord, hear our prayers. We thank you and praise you for this time in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hera. I think that was a really great time that we got to understand more about this whole thing. I really thank you so much. It's been a blessing.
No, thank you for this time. Thank you for engaging, and do take care during this time.
Yeah, you too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So for those of you who are watching, we want to thank you for listening to us and being able to put in time to understand what's going on, mental health and the different struggles that are related. We hope that that all of these information will be helpful to you. So for those of you who want to look at the resources, they're in the comments below. So go take a look at those. Yeah, we just want to remind you, if you are struggling with mental health and just the hardships of life, we want you to know that you don't have to struggle alone, right? You don't have to be an island, but you can come to us, to any of us, right? And just speak to us and just be vulnerable, right? And we want to understand where you're coming from, right? We don't want to take any assumptions knowing where you are or who you are, but we want to know who you are from what you tell us. And if you are having any doubts or any questions like that as well, you can always approach us as well. We have Instagram, Facebook, all those kinds of social media. You can email us as well. We also have Ask a Question, which you will find a link down below in the comments as well. And just let us know, right? We would be honored and blessed to walk alongside you with whatever you're facing in life. And so yeah, so thank you again, Dr. Hera. We hope we didn't take too much of your time.
Not at all. Pleasure, Liu. Thank you for organizing this.
Yeah, it's my pleasure too. All right, but we appreciate it so much.
God bless you.
Yeah, God bless. And until we meet again, yeah, take care. God bless. And yeah, take care.
You too, everyone.
Right.
Take care. Bye.